Hello, everyone. It's Beth, and thanks for tuning in to Social Leopards today. Have you ever had a friend struggling in a truly unhealthy relationship? One where emotional abuse is so glaringly obvious, but you're at a loss to help? Perhaps your friend is making a lot of excuses to allow their partner's poor behavior, or maybe they're suffering in silence. Or maybe, just maybe, that person is you. And you've endured the pain for so long, it feels like a prison. Today's featured contributor is Samara Knight, and she has walked in those shoes. She now uses Substack.com as a way to share her experiences and wisdom as a survivor, and hopefully to shed some light on the dark side of abuse, especially the kind that doesn't leave a physical mark. The article I want to share with you today is titled, "The Silent Erosion of Choice: How Coercive Control Affects Decision-Making." That title alone says a lot, because the longer someone is entangled in an emotionally abusive relationship, the harder it is to find those knots that you can start to untie. You can lose yourself. Your value becomes so small, it's hard to find any hope at all. This story really highlights some very old feelings that I may share a little bit later. I am going to warn you that this is some really heavy material today, but I feel compelled to share it for those who don't have the strength or freedom to share their feelings aloud or publicly, or even with their friends or families. I'm grateful that Samara has found the strength to overcome and found a way to share her perspective through her lived experience. Okay, here we go. Domestic abuse isn't always obvious. It doesn't always come with bruises or raised voices. Sometimes it shows up in the quiet dismissal of your words, the way your preferences are mocked, or how your voice gradually disappears from the decisions that shape your world. At the center of coercive control is a need for dominance, an insistence on overtaking someone else's voice, autonomy, and identity. For many victims, the deepest wound isn't from a single violent act, but from the slow, daily loss of the ability to make a decision. This loss doesn't vanish when the relationship ends. Instead, it lingers in everyday life, deciding what to wear, what to eat, how to simply exist. This is how coercive control affects decision-making in a lasting and painful way. Being denied a say in your own life. When coercive control is present in a relationship, key life choices, financial, legal, personal, are often made solely by the abuser. The victim is either kept completely in the dark or pushed into agreement through manipulation without being given a true opportunity to say yes or no. It is a pattern of being purposely excluded, overruled, or ignored. My ex applied for a mortgage in both our names without ever discussing it with me, one survivor shared. I only found out when the paperwork arrived to sign. It would have locked me into a 30-year financial tie to him and to a life I hadn't chosen. Another recalled, he got a vasectomy without even mentioning it, secretly took out a loan for the equity of the house, started a business behind my back with my money, and ran it with the mistress. This kind of behavior is profoundly destabilizing. When your partner consistently makes life-altering decisions, either without you or against your wishes, it reinforces the belief that your input doesn't matter. Over time, it breaks down your ownership over your life and your internal sense of authority and autonomy. You start to believe your voice doesn't belong in the conversation. Eventually, confusion takes over. Many survivors describe the feeling of drifting through life, unable to influence decisions about their home, their future, or even their finances. This is how coercive control affects decision-making, not by a single act, but through a gradual silencing. When fear shapes every decision. Coercion doesn't always arrive with threats or shouting. Sometimes it's subtle and methodical. a steady stream of pressure that chips away at your resistance. It may come in the form of guilt tripping, emotional manipulation, or carefully disguised remarks designed to steer you in a particular direction. One survivor described, "My ex and I had an argument that lasted 9 months. I said no continuously. He would not give up. I finally couldn't take it anymore. Later, he said that I agreed with him. No, I was psychologically beaten into submission." Another shared, "I stopped making decisions that made me happy for the sake of keeping the peace. I dreaded seeing his name pop up because I was in this state of fear about what I'd done wrong now." In abusive dynamics, saying no becomes risky, not always because of the physical danger, but because of the aftermath. Days of sulking, blame, exhausting debates, or cold withdrawal. This persistent punishment for non-compliance teaches the victim to stop resisting. The abuser might say, "I'm just trying to talk," but in reality, it's an exhausting cycle, one that wears down the victim's capacity to say or even feel no. Decisions stop being based on what's right for them and instead become about what will end the conflict. Sometimes coercion escalates into unmistakable intimidation, threats, and fear used as a weapon to secure compliance. If I disagreed with him, he'd stand over me, clench his fists, and say, "You're really going to make me do this?" I always backed down, every time. This kind of physical and verbal aggression leaves a lasting mark. Even when the threats aren't repeated, the memory of them becomes enough to silence future resistance. Over time, the victim starts anticipating the abuser's preferences and adjusts their choices accordingly, not out of agreement, but out of fear. Destroying self-trust one comment at a time. Decision-making relies on a foundational belief that your thoughts and feelings are valid. In relationships marked by coercive control, that belief is slowly dismantled. Abusers often belittle or mock their partner's choices through sarcasm, patronizing remarks, or subtle ridicule. Over time, this chips away at a person's confidence in their own judgment. One survivor wrote, "I had no idea what I even liked anymore, and I doubted decisions and constantly second-guessed myself." Another added, "When your internal guide has been systematically tampered with or nearly destroyed, it's an uphill battle to trust your own decisions." The manipulation is often framed as concern or logic. "I just don't think that's a good idea. You always get these things wrong. You're so emotional. Just calm down and let me handle it." Such comments send the clear message that you're not competent enough to decide. Eventually, victims internalize this and begin relying on their abuser to make even simple decisions. The effects go far beyond the relationship. Survivors often find themselves paralyzed by small choices long after leaving, wondering if their preferences are wrong, irrational, or deserving of criticism. This ongoing confusion is one of the ways coercive control affects decision-making, leaving a psychological residue that's hard to shake. The illusion of choice in coercive relationships. Control isn't always exercised through force. Sometimes it's maintained by offering meaningless choices or withholding vital information until it's too late. One survivor said, "Oh, he has asked my opinion on refinancing the house. 3 options, and he chose the one directly opposite of what I preferred. Then I had no choice but to sign the papers." Another added, "He made it look like I had a say by asking me to pick the curtain color, but he already bought the house." These experiences reveal a common tactic of giving the appearance of collaboration while keeping real power out of reach. It's a manipulative strategy where the victim's input is solicited but ignored, creating the illusion that they're part of the process. Over time, this dynamic teaches victims that their voice changes nothing. Their consent becomes a formality, their preferences irrelevant. Eventually, many stop offering input at all. This quiet retreat is another way coercive control affects decision-making, training the victim to disappear from their own life. Urgency, pressure, and no room to reconsider. Healthy decisions are made with space to think, ask questions, and change your mind. In coercively controlled relationships, that space is denied. Victims are frequently pushed to decide quickly, often under emotional stress, and then blamed or shamed if they hesitate or change their minds later. One survivor described, "You are not allowed to make one decision. Ask a question, only communicate through text, and know nothing. They gaslight you to take focus off their actions." Another added, "I ended up utterly demoralized by constantly having to fight for a say in any decision and still usually being invalidated or condescended to." Abusers often create artificial deadlines, raising the stakes or applying emotional pressure to force a rushed decision. I was cooking dinner, and my husband told me we needed to decide then and there if we were going to purchase a particular house. I told him I couldn't decide in that moment, and he said, "Okay then, if you can't decide now, I will just make the decision for myself." The pace is deliberately overwhelming, designed to make sure the victim can't respond with confidence. Even reasonable hesitation is met with blame. "You said yes. Now you're going to change your mind again? You're being dramatic. We already agreed." This creates long-term anxiety around decision-making. Victims learn it's easier to comply than to risk being mocked, ignored, or punished. This is another critical way coercive control affects decision-making, by replacing thoughtful choices with reflexive compliance. Rebuilding the right to choose after coercion. Leaving an abusive relationship doesn't magically restore confidence. Many survivors find that, even after regaining physical freedom, their decision-making ability is still compromised. Years of being silenced or second-guessed leaves a painful void. One survivor shared, "After I left him, suddenly I was faced with decisions I had never had to make before because he had always decided everything for me. I had to relearn how to make choices for myself, which was both terrifying and freeing." Another wrote, "I grieved for the years I felt I wasted trying to make the relationship work, but I embraced the freedom of finally being able to make decisions without criticism." This part of healing takes time. It often starts small, choosing meals, wearing different clothes, setting a boundary, but each act is powerful. With every decision, the survivor reconnects with their own identity. "I can think about what I want and especially what I need, make my own decisions and mistakes," one woman explained. "I can enjoy the simple things in life. I now have the space to get to know me in all my imperfections." Though the process is slow, this is where recovery begins, in the quiet, everyday choices that start to reflect the survivor's true self. This is how healing from coercive control affects decision-making in the most liberating way. How to support a survivor's right to decide. If someone you care about is healing from coercive control, the most meaningful thing you can do is step back and let them step forward. Even loving guidance can feel intrusive when someone is learning to trust their own voice. One survivor offered this, Don't tell them what they need to do. They have enough of that already. Let them know you see them and will support them no matter what. Help them to feel like they have the ability to make decisions and take some control for themselves. Survivors don't need to be told what to do. They need to be supported in discovering it. Offer space, not answers. Ask questions instead of giving instructions. Be patient with hesitation and celebrate small decisions. Above all, show them that their right to choose matters, because ultimately, healing begins when a survivor realizes that the right to decide has always been and will always be theirs. The end. If you need to hit the pause button and come back after a few minutes, I'm totally going to understand. This is a lot, but so worth the telling of it. What truly stands out to me in this article is the profound strength it takes for survivors of coercive control to reclaim simple, but yet deeply significant acts like making choices for themselves. The stories that were shared remind us that autonomy, something that so many of us take for granted, is hard won for those who have suffered environments where their agency was systematically eroded. I'm struck by how daunting and difficult, but also empowering it can be to rediscover your own personal preferences after living for years under someone else's shadow. This narrative also highlights the importance of patience, both from the survivor toward themselves and from the people who love and support them. It's kind of a delicate balance, right? Wanting to help, but understanding that real healing means taking that step back and holding space for them, letting that survivor's voice come forward. The advice to offer space rather than solutions feels really wise to me. Healing isn't about receiving answers, but it's about regaining that confidence to ask your own questions and to trust your own responses. Back in season 3, it was episode 36. Bea and I had the privilege of speaking with Hannah Parker, who had made the difficult decision to go no contact with a parent. And I thought about her story as I was first reading this article. She also gave advice to give space and allow the person to seek anything beyond a listening ear. As although I know many of us have good intentions, advice isn't always the thing that's needed, especially as someone is processing their pain. A listening ear and an "I'm here and I'm ready to listen anytime you need me to. Let me know if you need anything at all." Those types of comments are more than enough. I know all of us fixers out there want to find the magic words to ease the pain, put the Band-Aid on, heal the wound, but the sad truth is that healing is a real journey. I also had a time in my life where I was in a relationship with a very controlling person. This person, much later and well after the relationship was over, did finally admit and apologize for actively seeking to reduce my joy, and that his actions were jealousy-based. If he couldn't be happy, he sought to make sure I was also unhappy. That was after he had finally chosen to seek professional help, and it literally blew my mind that I actually got an apology at all from this particular person. I can say that at the time the relationship had ended, my self-esteem was at an all-time low, and it took the failure of a subsequent relationship for me to find my path forward. I also chose to seek professional counseling and read at least a dozen self-help books, mostly to try to get the change in my mindset to shift permanently. And I'm grateful to be now in a healthy relationship where I can be myself without fear or judgment, or worse. So for those of you who are going through it, I'm here to say that each journey is unique, and healing from coercive control and emotional abuse is just as unique for every individual. Don't measure yourself against this story or anything that someone else has to say about your life. You have to listen to your voice, the one that's probably buried deep inside you right now. the one that existed prior to this pain, the one who understands that this is not right, and you simply can't find the way out right now. Deciding what to eat or what to wear or when to rest might seem really trivial to some people, but for a survivor, these everyday choices are revolutionary acts of self-affirmation. Each represents a step toward reclaiming your identity, and these things are essential for both recovery and for personal growth. Finally, the article's closing thoughts linger with me. The right to decide has always belonged to the survivor, even if it was temporarily taken from them. There's a sense of hope and promise there that no matter how little control you may feel, that right to decide is never truly lost. Again, if you are seeing yourself in this moment, unable to reclaim your right to decide at this time, you're not alone. I encourage you to seek wisdom, even if all you can do now is gather information. It took me so very long to get back to my old self, to regain and reclaim my freedom. And it was scary at times, and there were some threats at times in the beginning. The good news is that I'm here today to experience the gratitude of having moved on and healed. Okay, another deep breath here from me. Next week is going to be a little bit lighter, as I'm going to be reflecting on Karun Paul's low-key habits that improved my mental health. It's a realistic viewpoint from an introvert, but I think what he has to say is relatable to the masses, and I hope you agree. Until next time, take care.